I'll go ahead and start the meeting. I've got Dennis Roshay here. He's a good friend of mine. He's been a videographer for many, many years. And he'll be showing a movie on, what's the name of it?
In Search of the Fremont.
Him and Sky went up and camped out and took pictures of the petroglyphs and made a movie out of it. And with that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Dennis. I'll start the video.
It's interesting about this first shot is that I didn't see what you're going to see when I first took it. I was just at home, you know how you look at your photos, and I noticed some lines, and I made it get bigger and bigger, and pretty soon this face just came out of the rock that I had never seen. And I said, well, this is the beginning for this video.
We are taking a road trip through parts of Colorado and Utah to look for rock art that we have only read about, images that have been called Fremont by archaeologists, as well as images that will remind us of the rock art in our own part of Arizona. The word Fremont is a generic label for a culture first noticed by anthropologist Noel Morse in 1928 along the Fremont River that flows through what is now Capitol Reef National Monument outside Torrey, Utah, and which indeed has its own share of Fremont-style rock art. Labels imply neat categories, but the so-called Fremont culture is really more fluid than that, a mix of recognizable ancient Puebloan, local variations, and a seemingly distinct culture. People moved throughout the vast landscape of ancient Western North America, coming together, separating, creating, and evolving. Some of the groups clearly became the modern Hopi, Zuni, and Pueblo peoples, but no one is sure who the Fremont became, much less who they were to begin with. But their rock art is fabulous. We will mainly be exploring sites near Rangeley, Colorado, then Dinosaur National Monument, and Vernal, Utah. Rangeley is in northwest Colorado, southeast of Dinosaur National Monument, a rural area we don't know much about. Luckily for us, the Rangeley Chamber of Commerce has published a map and guide to many of the sites in the area, and this is where we begin. The rock art is a mix of pictographs, painted images, and petroglyphs, images pecked into rock walls. Literature says there are more than 50 archaeological sites in the area, going back 11,000 years or more. Archaeologists group the sites and rock art into Barrier Canyon style, then Fremont, and later Shoshone and Ute. We camped at a reservoir east of town, a nice place for some of us to cool off and relax after hiking all day. There are a few sites near there, mostly hard to find and not very impressive. Most of the sites are along State Highway 139 that follows along East Douglas Creek, which makes sense. Ancient peoples would have traveled the same river corridor. Archaeologists created a whole set of interpretive signs and road markers to guide a visitor to the best sites. We are sure there are others they didn't mention. One of these, the Cocopelli site, was described in the journals of the 1776 Dominguez Escalante expedition. The Cocopelli figure indicates ties to the ancestral Puebloan traditions to the south in the Four Corners region, though no one knows exactly what Cocopelli represents. The corn pictograph next to it is the most significant depiction of maize in the area. The steel cable across the pictograph is an attempt to keep the rock from shearing off from the cliff and falling into pieces below. The Cow Canyon site has older pictographs, some with petroglyphs inscribed over them. Some of those are more recent Ute or Shoshone glyphs, particularly the one with the gun. East 4 Mile site is primarily Fremont, along a trail that leads into a canyon, with a swing gate cattle guard at one point. Early cowboy ranchers were kind enough to spare the main petroglyph panel during their target shooting, though later tourists have been less kind. At the end of the hike is the so-called Sun Dagger pictograph, though what astronomical event the spirals may be marking is uncertain. The discovery of corn stalks and past excavations near here attest to ancient agriculture in the area. The Hoodoo site is obviously named. The ancient Puebloans were fond of signaling out sites like this with twin features, like these in what is now Bluff, Utah, near the Great House there. But we don't know if these people did the same, though they did create rock art here. The Lookout site is so named because of modern interpretations of what the site might have been used for. The ruin may have been a watchtower. There are several similar sites along the river valley. This site also contains a number of aligned and laboriously drilled holes in the bedrock. The purpose of the holes is unknown. Modern speculation includes astronomical interpretations, but no one knows for sure what the original intent was. Waving Hands includes a collection of small Fremont figures, and in an alcove around the corner are Ute figures, horses, arrows, and outlined hands. One ancient figure, high on a cliff wall, is referred to as the Guardian, a figure that can be seen from a distance as people travel this river corridor, although no one knows for sure if guarding, warning, or greeting is the purpose of the figure. Other sites are off of County Road 23 to the west, also called Dragon Trail Road. Carrot Man includes Barrier Canyon-style pictographs, a style that goes back at least 4,000 years, as well as Fremont culture figures and a few later Ute figures. The blue images may have been done with azurite, which is rare in this area and would indicate trading or extensive travel. A small spring in the drainage would have made this an appealing spot for ancient inhabitants through the millennia. The shield figure site was a bit of a hike to a few well-executed petroglyphs. The Fremont Ridge site was the longest hike after the longest drive off the main dirt road, with interesting views and mostly older non-representational petroglyphs. It was hot, and some of us wanted to rest a lot. From Rangeley, we headed west towards Dinosaur National Monument, which has some of the most impressive and most photographed rock art sites around, as well as a huge number of dinosaur fossils, though why anyone would want to look at fossils with all this great rock art around is beyond me. On the way out of Rangeley, we stopped at Mellon Hill, a possible habitation site with a few grinding slicks and some not very interesting rock art, tucked away in a side canyon off the highway. Dinosaur National Monument, on the border between Colorado and Utah at the confluence of the Green and Yampa rivers, is named because of the paleontology of the area, but it is also rich with evidence of thousands of years of habitation and some amazing rock art sites. People have been drawn here because of the abundant water, as well as the magnificent scenery. It is thought the Fremont, one group in a long line of inhabitants, occupied this area from about 200 to 1300 AD, probably moving in and out of the area seasonally depending on the availability of food and possibly the weather. After getting settled in the campground, we begin our explorations. The rock art has changed considerably from what we saw around Rangeley. Petroglyph panels are larger and more intricate, and we begin to see large, life-size solitary images of exceptional quality. Two easily accessible rock art sites, Swelter Shelter and Cub Creek, are along Cub Creek Road in the western part of the monument. Swelter Shelter, just a short walk off the road, includes both petroglyphs and pictographs. This overhang may have been a possible habitation site, and the Fremont images suggest the site was used for a continuous length of time. When the site was excavated, projectile points were found dating to between 4000 and 7000 BC. On the right side of the shelter, we see 1,000-year-old trapezoid-shaped figures the Fremont are known for. They seem to be descending down the panel. On the left side, we see their possible transformation into shamans or other ceremonial figures. Archaeologist Carol Patterson theorizes that when the Fremont disappeared from the archaeological record, they migrated south and became what we know today as the Apache, and that these figures on the left side of this shelter represent what became Apache Ga'an dancers. The Cub Creek site has a vast array of petroglyphs, some on low boulders near the road, or not far from the creek before the road existed, and some higher up on cliff walls far above the valley floor. This large boulder has many glyphs that Carol Patterson thinks tell the emergence story of the Apache. She also thinks the boulder is a miniature representation of the mountain above it. Here she sees the two brothers, White Haktien and Black Haktien, who were responsible for the emergence story. The Apache story goes that they had to grow the mountain high enough so that everyone could reach the next world, but it stopped growing short of the entrance. Then Spider and Fly, which we can see here, come to the rescue by securing an opening into this world and lowering 4 rays from the sun for the people to use to climb into this world. The Hopi, Zuni, and other Southwest peoples have similar emergence stories, which makes us wonder where this fundamental creation myth comes from. A little further along Cub Creek, we find a series of glyphs on a ledge high above the river. The unique lizard panel has 9 lizards, or salamanders, the largest about 6 feet long, as well as 2 anthropomorphs. These are not a common glyph in the area, but salamanders are an important element in many native origin stories in the Southwest, and Patterson says they're part of the Apache rain ceremonies, which she thinks gives credence to her theory. Other images along the same cliff shelf high above the valley seem to emerge ghost-like from the rock, showing faces decorated with necklaces, earbobs, and any number of personal adornments. Each seems quite individual and yet stylistically similar. The McKee Springs sites are close to the Green River, with some of the most skilled, easily recognized, and oft reproduced rock art around. It was profound to see them in real life. Several sites along the road offer opportunities to stop, hike, and gaze at this magnificent work. This glyph greets visitors entering the area of McKee Springs. Here we can see superimpositions of buffalo glyphs over earlier images, indicating a more recent group of visitors, perhaps the Shoshone or Ute. In a dazzling display of craftsmanship, these figures lining this cliff face represent what has been called the classic vernal style. Expertly pecked and engraved, these images have trapezoidal bodies featuring broad shoulders, smaller waists, large heads, and stunning arrays of personal adornment, such as necklaces and exotic headdresses. However, some of the subject matter can give one pause. Besides holding shields and swords and other implements of conflict, many figures are displaying what seem to be severed heads, either as warriors' trophies or badges of honor, or possibly even a warning to possible intruders in the area. We will see in the vernal area much more graphic images of the severed head motif. This series of stunning glyphs exists along a well-used ledge pathway. These images are so striking that any intruder would proceed with caution or perhaps just go away. That could certainly be the intent, or maybe they were just showing off. Either way, the message seems clear. Tread lightly if you enter here. This glyph seems to be of a couple possibly holding hands and seems to have a prominent space on the cliff face. This image with the shield, the severed hanging head, is a dude you don't want to run into if hiking a forbidden canyon. He represents, for us, everything we have ever thought or seen about the Fremont. Archetypal, the kind of image that really makes a lasting impression. Not far west of Dinosaur National Monument is the modern town of Vernal, Utah. Vernal gives its name to what's called the Vernal classic style of Fremont rock art. North of the town is a private petroglyph site, McConkey Ranch, along Dry Creek. The family that owns the ranch has made some of the sites accessible to the public. These are some of the most detailed, stunning, and artistic petroglyphs we have ever seen. The amount of detail in some of the almost life-size human figures is breathtaking. The attire worn by these figures is quite individualistic, creating the impression that these were singular people of importance with their own distinctive style of dress. Yet the execution of the petroglyphs almost seems like it was done by one artist. In the Italian Renaissance, people like Michelangelo were hired by wealthy patrons who then used the art to demonstrate their own power. Perhaps something like that could be happening here. These figures are large and skillfully executed. Some are quite intimidating and were meant to be seen. Closer to home, think of Chaco Canyon. Nobody needed those stupendous buildings to live in. What did they show to anyone who saw them? Power. In classic Vernal, the images showed not only power, but an implied threat to anyone who might view them, especially these hanging heads, some shown with dripping blood, and even traces of a pool of red paint, which vanished in the 1930s or so when the rock below the petroglyph broke off and fell. And some show the head with tears in its eyes. It's a definite statement, even if we today don't know what the statement was. Here's a weeping head with a pair of disembodied legs, reminding us of a similar glyph in Lithodendron Wash outside Holbrook, Arizona. Did they hold the heads of victims freshly executed? These are somewhat disturbing images despite their intricate creation. Of other interest is this bear glyph high on the cliff face above all these others. It's clearly of a different style and time period. Also, these two figures with knobby knees, which seem to be either urinating or offering semen in a possible ceremonial act of some kind. There are also a small number of images that are part of a group portrait of some kind. Were these the ancient elites of a specific time? Were these group images from another time period of the same community? There's so many unknowns here. Perhaps the most famous of the group portraits sits hundreds of feet above the valley floor at a point at the end of the mesa. It is known as the Sun Carrier panel, sometimes referred to as the Three Kings panel, even though there are 6 or 7 figures here. The central figure towers a bit over the others and is wearing a kind of kingly attire. You get the impression that he is in charge. He seems to be holding some kind of shield and a scalp or a head affixed to a pole. To the left of him is a figure wearing some kind of mask, it seems. All these figures, except one, are dressed in their finery, and the technique used to define them is quite individual and different from the figure to the right of the central king figure. This image is in relief, being projected from the flat background. He's not wearing any ornamentation. It looks a bit like he's being held up by supports under his armpits. The image appears to be just hanging there with its feet pointed down, not standing on anything. Is this a prisoner next in line to have its head cut off? Is it a spirit image? This is a summary of most of the images here to give a clearer picture of what is presented hundreds of feet above the village which once occupied this fertile valley. Hiking up canyon from McConkey Ranch, up near the rim of the canyon, After passing some eye-catching rock art, we finally arrive at a panel with the glyph we would later learn is called the turtle glyph by locals, even though the glyph doesn't dominate the panel and looks more like an armadillo. The panel is quite impressive with its original images and the superimposition of later images. We can make out a Fremont figure dressed in his finery and holding a severed head with tears in its eyes and dripping blood. Superimposed over that is a large circle figure with well-defined legs and arms outstretched toward a figure to the left. Below, to the left, is a bear-like creature holding a spear seemingly pointed at the two figures. This bear-like glyph was so similar to the one at McConkey Ranch that it seems to have been done by the same artist. It is of a different time period with a seemingly different cultural affiliation than the Fremont figures. There's some interesting history at this panel, whatever the story may be. The people we are calling the Fremont left a number of distinctive artifacts, including their basketry and footwear, that sets them apart as a culture. Most remarkable, perhaps, are these unfired clay figurines that have a detailed likeness to many of the figures in the rock art. The progression in the archaeological record is from Barrier Canyon to Fremont. Phil Geib, in Glen Canyon Revisited, said he thought the Fremont were the descendants of the Barrier Canyon people. If you consider these small Barrier Canyon-style figurines, found in a cave above Horseshoe Canyon in Utah and dated to 4800–5600 BCE, and compare them to the later Fremont figurines and to the rock art, the similarities are obvious. As to where the Fremont eventually went, besides Carroll's Apache theory, there are also similarities to later Pueblo cultures. In Traces of Fremont, by Stephen R. Sims, a flicker headdress artifact is compared to a headdress on a petroglyph figure and to a 1935 deer dancer from San Juan Pueblo, now Oque-Awingay Pueblo, in New Mexico. The bottom line is that Fremont is simply one label we use in an attempt to simplify a complex cultural landscape and the history of widely disparate groups of people who traveled across the land, speaking a variety of languages, with a vast collection of stories, histories, and practices, who left their artifacts and art as they moved on to merge or become the ancestors of the different peoples that we recognize today. All we can really say is that the Fremont were artistic, somewhat intense, and disposed to share their stories and signs on the cliff faces around them. And while we can't explain or interpret those to our own satisfaction, we can certainly be impressed by them and appreciate their power.
He won't stop. See, he wants to keep playing. See? You get to see it again.
Oh, yeah. Well, that was
Right.
fantastic, Dennis. I didn't realize that Fremont had such beautiful artwork.
Yeah, the hanging head gets your attention. I mean, that, and I don't get the tears. Anybody got a take on that? I mean, are they just, I don't know, showing suffering, or are they showing, I mean, you don't see the point in it somehow, or I don't, you know?
Before they got in heaven.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
I would be crying. Right?
And that last group, you know, of those guys, they look almost different even than the regular Fremont. They seem like a real special group of some kind, you know? And the heyday of this was about the same time that Chaco was up. And, there's stories about Chaco and, it turned into a bad place and blah, blah, blah. So you just wonder what was going on 1000 or 1100, all over. Yeah, it's pretty interesting. I was really surprised when I first saw that. The heads, I mean, 'cause you don't see them very often in the pictures, you say, oh, what is that?
How long was your trip?
I think it was, I went up to a rock art conference, a symposium called URARA, Utah Rock Art Research Association. It was in Vernal. And the narrator, Sky, she's a dance leader and we happened to be at a dance camp. And she said, well, I'm going to follow you up there. And so she followed me up. We each had little trailers and we went up and did that. And I went to the conference and she hung out and we just collected all this.
Wow.
When we were shooting film, if you took 2 rolls with you, that was a lot of film, especially if they were 36 exposures. Now with digital, you go out with a 64 gigabyte memory card, right? So what happens is we end up making this stuff because we think, what are we going to do with all these pictures? That we used to have albums, we put the pictures in. Now they're on little discs like this and you never see them. So that's where a lot of these videos, we decided to make them and just share them out just because, otherwise, we never see them ourselves, really. So, yeah.
Sure appreciate you doing.
Well, most of the pictures you were showing, those were still shots, not video.
Yeah, most of those were stills. And there were quite a few from around here when we talked about the areas here, especially at the end, that one big rock with all the glyphs on it, that's out here in Holbrook and some other stuff. But most of it's all from up there in that trip. Dinosaur is really a beautiful place. If you've never been there, it's an interesting monument,
Where are the rock art figures in Dinosaur? Are they go to the display of the fossils first and get the rock art?
I didn't understand that.
Well, I want to know, will you go to the main Park Service thing and see the fossils? Where is the rock art at?
In comparison to the fossils.
Is it right close to them? No.
You showed some pictures of fossils.
Oh, yeah, that was sort of, most people go there for fossils, so she had to put that line in. She said, can't imagine why anybody, when there's all that rock art around, would be interested in old bones, which that's our take on,
How far is it from in Dinosaur, curiosity, where is that fossil and artwork?
it's right there.
Right there.
All together?
Yeah, yeah, it's all there. It's within. Well, one group is around the back, it's about an 8-mile drive to that one canyon. But the other stuff is right there, 3 or 4 miles from the visitor center and yeah,
Walking or driving?
yeah.
Walking.
It was interesting. We got the Escalante Dominguez book, of their trip. It was the same one. It was just funny. We went up that same canyon. They went to Dinosaur and then they went over to Vernal. So it's sort of like there was a trail what everybody was doing at one point. So you're next. Yeah. 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 So
What are you gonna do next?
well, we went further south and we did one on the Barrier Canyon. The barriers are the ones that are really old that we were comparing these to. They're the ones without the arms and stuff, and they're life size and they're more spiritual. There's no heads or anything. When you're in the presence of those glyphs, those guys were connected in a way that a lot of those other guys weren't. These other guys seem very militaristic almost, like we're in charge now, look out. The other ones, and we don't know, it's just a guess,
Right.
You go to rock art sites, if you've been to many of them, some of them really strike you and you can be there a while and you can feel a vibe there, Sometimes, especially a canyon over here called Chevelon out of Winslow, there are some places there where I look at these guys and I said, they could make it rain anytime. You know, because the Fremont, they didn't have the little animals, the little familiars and stuff. The other older ones, you know, you had these, it was almost like the spirit guides. You see little butterflies, or you see birds, or you see hummingbirds on their shoulders, you know, it was like their familiars when they would go into a trance state. Maybe that was their animal that they connected with, you know. And when you did your ayahuasca thing, did you find an animal that you were connected with? See, that's what I think happened. Wow.
Well, the question I have is, were all of these sites that you went to, were they well publicized? You had very easy time finding them?
Yeah,
Or were
pretty
some of them
much. The
kinda
first
hid
ones,
away?
we had little guides from the Chamber of Commerce with numbers, you know, you could stop along the road. The one in Dinosaur, you could find out where things were. They told you which canyons and where the roads were. You had to go find them, but they were close to the roads. And then that McConkey Ranch, at the very end, those, they asked for $5. You go in, it's just open. You just park there, and the cigar box, actually. And they just asked for a donation, and the families kept it open now for forever. So most of them are very,
So they're privately, I mean, are we talking ranchers, ranching? families?
yeah,
Not
The McConkey Ranch is, no.
Road ranch, huh?
no, so. Yeah, half of that was on public land, the rest of it was private, but it was open to. Yeah, they want to share it in a way,
Is
you
it
know, and
right?
people have been pretty good about it, except I don't know if you caught that, someone stole the door off the bathroom. I mean, and that's a heavy door. If you've ever been to a BLM bathroom, they weigh probably 100 pounds. Number. They're huge. I mean, it's hysterical that someone would steal a door. It's, yeah, a nice shower curtain, though, I thought they put up. No. Wow.
There's always that danger of vandalism. We have such, I don't know, stupid people out there that just don't respect anything. That's the fear.
Yeah, it's
Right.
hard to imagine anyone needing a door like
Yeah,
that.
yeah, that was crazy. They need to-
Unless they wanted firewood for some reason.
Well, no, they're
Hard
metal,
out.
those doors,
Oh,
you know.
Where did they carry it to?
You saw it?
Wow.
Somebody today that I was talking to was telling me this, he is not clear on dates, so I don't really know how long ago this was, but there is a, I mean, he had figures, so he knows that they're over by Snowflake. There are some archaeological sites over there.
Yeah,
oh,
yeah,
yes.
yeah. Actually, I'm a site steward to a handful that are owned by the Archaeological Conservancy.
That part was the day that he was there.
Yeah, there's a big one outside of town there in Taylor called 4 Mile, which is actually 4 miles out. And that was a really big site. It's on Sholo Creek, I think there.
Oh, that makes sense.
And then
People are unfortunately digging. It's not safe, you know, he saw, yeah, they were digging and they were not authorized to do that.
yeah,
Some
well,
young
that's
people.
one of the,
Well, most of that was back in the 1950s or possibly
Yeah.
early.
but there's still, you know, the biggest thing we see are vandalism still. People
Yeah.
are still, another generation thinks they can just dig and find some
Yeah,
other
I
stuff.
something, I'm 20 something,
Yeah,
they were holding them and talking.
yeah, no, it's,
Like,
you know, we still find stuff on our land that just comes up from the rain, you know, and this place was heavily populated. Yeah, all over here too, you know.
Yeah, we used to find arrowheads and things on, that's up above the post office, but that whole stretch there, even
Yeah.
before the post office was built. It was some really good pottery shards down there.
Yeah.
Things, yeah, brown ones. With that ridge design.
Yeah, well, there's the Pinedale Rune, I think, the big one. Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah. So Yeah, once you get into this stuff, it's interesting. I started off with cliff dwellings, because there I could see those. The ones on the surface weren't so interesting.
Right.
And then the rock art just caught my eye. It seemed more personal somehow. Not that you could read it, but you got the sense that somebody was doing something and you could interpret it any way you want or not. But, it was just, it seemed humanity was there more, it seemed like. And so that's why I'm still interested. Plus, it gets you into places you would never go otherwise. Like, I don't go up that canyon. Someone said there's something there. Yeah. So,
What's that wildlife center over where they do the hummingbird festival? That was a ranch, but Game and Fish Department has it as a conservation area over there south of Niagara, I think. Yeah, thank you. South of Springer, well, they do a huge hummingbird festival at the end of July every year. But I remember I was working for Game and Fish when that property was purchased because the rancher went to, was it called? I'm trying to remember. The rancher came to the Game and Fish Department because he didn't want it to go to development. So, so I was part of that whole budget, but not with the money part, I was the budget. So, yeah, so we had to find funding sources because that's very strictly regulated. So there had to be an endangered species component, also water, and there is a running stream on the property. But there's a fantastic Indian brew in there, and that's what I was going to ask about. Unbelievable artwork. I mean, it's amazing.
The rock art, right, across the little street.
And there is a dwelling, yeah, you kind of go up a little, this is on the ranch property, or now the Game and Fish Conservation Area. And that is just the craftsmanship in creating these they're not dwellings, they're ceremonial, I think.
yeah, I'm not sure where you're talking about. This one outside of Springerville, up in that
We have
one?
to find that concept. Why
There's something that's a diamond.
area over there, and it's a gorgeous place, but it has this amazing.
She spent the life of them.
You did a couple of nights. It is beautiful.
Well, is there anybody on the Zoom meeting that would like to ask any questions?
They didn't get to see it.
I guess not. Well, there's still quite a few people on Zoom, so.
It's laid out real pretty artistic, something like Chaco Canyon. It's really pretty.
So where is this place, this one you're talking about?
Yeah, go south from Springville, you go up to the top of the hill.
Okay, so yes, the one I was talking
There's
about there. Yeah,
10 miles of dirt road down to.
yeah. There's a nice little center there. That's a huge ruin. I know the name of that one. Yeah.
The first time I saw it, it was just stunning.
Yeah.
They have some neat rock art there too.
What was you were talking about the spider and the what? When you were showing the picture of the spider and
And the fly.
the fly. What was the significance of the?
Well,
Spider and fly.
this is the Apache emerging, their story. It's really interesting, like the Hopis have in the Fourth World, the Hopi, they came up through a reed, so they were trying to get up on top of this mountain. The mountain stopped growing. So spider and fly somehow got up through there and lowered rays of the sun down so the people could climb up. And that's just the Apache story that, now we got that from Carol Patterson. I'm not familiar with the. Yeah, she spent last summer with them up here in the mountains, so she's been really,
Well, the Hopi and the Zuni have some of their deities. One of the first deities is Spider Woman. And she created people, I believe.
yeah, spider grandmother too, yeah.
Fremont people, when the road went through, the highway went through, they were gonna dig right through one of these ruins and they said, no. And they went ahead and every time they poured cement, it cracked. They say, the Spider Woman.
Oh,
Site White Mountain.
Site,
I always forget the name, Site White Mountain Wildlife Area.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting to go up to when they're catching the hummingbirds.
Yeah,
That's a good,
they're abandoning them.
Yeah.
it's this month, or July, end of July.
Yeah, I know, July.
Yeah,
It's quite interesting. Of course, there's a whole lot of people.
I looked it up. Yeah.
right.
It's
Yeah.
gorgeous, right?
Like Richard mentioned, it's the only bird that can fly backwards.
Right.
You think of it.
It's fun to watch.
Well,
Wow.
if anybody has any more questions on this, I'll go ahead and end the meeting. We can still stay and talk amongst ourselves. But I want to thank you again, Dennis. That
All
was a
right,
fantastic movie. I'm glad
right.
you were able to come and share it with us.
all right. Good, it was fun.
All right. With that, I'll go ahead and end it. Thanks for coming, everybody.
And thank you. Very good.
When is the next meeting?